In this week's episode of PokeClass, we're going to be taking a very close look at Landorus EX, a card which is set to create and define the City Championships format, which is coming up very soon. Stay tuned for a complete look at two different decks you can include him in, click the annotations to see the key parts of the video, or watch the whole thing to get the most out of the analysis. All this and more is in this week's episode of PokeClass, sponsored by Collector's Cash, your #1 place to go for Pokemon sealed products and single cards. Check them out after the show at www.collectorscash.com. Hey there everyone, and welcome to episode 95 of PokeClass, where we're going to be taking a look at a single card from the new set, Boundaries Crossed, which is set to define a whole series of City Championships which begin in a few weeks. So Boundaries Crossed is officially out, and people are already scrambling for this very card and paying the highest prices for it right now. So there must be something good about it, right? Of course there is, and if you haven't heard about it yet or want to know which decks you can play this guy in, then you've come to the right video. Let's talk about Landorus EX. So first, let's take a look at Landorus by itself so we can go over the good and bad points of the card, as well as its general statistics. At first glance, we have ourselves a 180 HP fighting type EX, which also has 2 attacks, weakness to water, resistance to lightning, and a fairly hefty 3 retreat cost. So the good points from just looking at the card is that it has a large HP number for an EX and is a fighting type, the main reason behind why this guy is just so good. The resistance to lightning is also very nice, as it can sponge hits better from things like regular Zekrom, which could still deal nice blows to it otherwise. It just gives it that extra edge against lightning based decks on top of it being a fighting type already. By having that 180 HP, resistance to lightning, and the ability to make full use of Eviolite, Landorus definitely has the tanking characteristic, as it could be tough to take down when this could get going from turn 1 and apply the early pressure. Speaking of early pressure, let's take a look at Landorus' attacks. The first one is the most hyped, costs just a single fighting energy, and is called Hammerhead. For your single energy, you get a base of 30 damage, which isn't too bad, but if you check out the small print, you also get to do 30 damage to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. Now, we all know how strong a 30 damage snipe can be thanks to Darkrai's stronghold of the format, so we know that this attack is going to be very handy. The fact that it does 30 damage to active for just 1 energy is probably the strongest part though, as you can rip through Dynamos and Dinos from turn 1, not only providing early pressure, but scoring quick knockouts and pull off donks too. This one attack could shape the choices of cards played by the opponent, such as maybe shifting over to the Dragon type Dino to avoid getting KO'd on turn 1, but that does open up people to Secret Rare Rayquaza donk, but that's a conversation for another time. The bottom line is that this attack is really good, not only against fighting weak Pokemon, but also against anything that relies on weaker basics to set up, as you can start picking them off straight away. So with a very good first attack, can Landorus get better? Actually, the answer is yes. Land's Judgment costs 2 fighting energy and a colourless, which allows you to do 80 damage. Not bad, but again, the key to this attack is in the small print, which reads, if you discard all the fighting energy attached to Landorus, this attack does 70 more damage. So your base 80 plus 70 for discarding either 2 or 3 energy creates a whopping 150 damage, the perfect amount for knocking out opposing Hydreigons and Blastoise, just to mention the 2 big evolutions right now. It also KOs a Darkrai regardless of what's attached to it, so that is also a very strong play. The fact that you need to discard fighting energy could however be a problem, as there is no efficient way to get them back, but still, it's a very powerful attack. Since Landorus is such a great attacker, there must be some downsides, and there are, which include its weakness. Now, water weakness hasn't been a problem in the past, but at the release of Landorus also came Keldeo and Blastoise, creating a new competitive water-based deck, which I'm sure you're all aware of. Blastoise is set to be played by a fair few people at Cities, and their Keldeo will be one-shotting your Landorus no problem, while you can't really keep up with them. So a double water weakness could become a thorn in Landorus' side. The other slightly awkward thing about it is its retreat cost. A retreat cost of 3 is going to become a pain, since you can only run 4 switch and won't always have it available when you need it the most, but there are ways around this particular hitch which we can take a look at later on in the video. And the final slight downside to Landorus is that there's no effective way to accelerate fighting energy. But that is only a minor hitch, as you only need the 1 energy to attack, but to get the second attack going turn after turn, it may hurt that little bit. Despite the small collection of bad points Landorus has, its good points definitely shine through, and now that we know all about the card, let's take a look at 2 decks with lists that you could use him in. The The first one we're going to take a look at is a mono fighting deck, probably the first deck that springs to mind when looking at a new bulky fighting attacker. Mono fighting decks have been a very popular rogue since it took states by storm last season, and Landorus is a reason for it to make a potential comeback as it solves a problem that these mono type decks usually face, and that problem is having an early attacker. The partners you'll have in a mono fighting deck will be Terrakion and its EX counterpart, which both need at least 2 energy to deal damage, and that extra turn of needing to attach an energy can really slow you down against faster decks. But since Landorus only needs a single energy to get damage onto the board, this could spring the fighting decks back into action. So let's have a look at a list for this particular deck, and this is a basic skeleton which you can add to either play yourself or play against. Your main attackers are obviously going to be Landorus for the early game, Terrakion EX for a big hitter later on and give you that extra energy boost, and then you've also got the regular Terrakion as your regular Pokemon Retaliator for those special situations. Landorus and Terrakion EX are going to be your main damage dealers, so you have 3 of each in here, but since Landorus is going to be your preferred starter, you can always bump up to 4 with the free space. I've only slotted in a single regular Terrakion in here at the moment since Landorus is just that little bit better, but for those situations when you want to give your opponent second thoughts about taking a KO just yet, Terrakion is perfect for that. The trainer cards here are fairly standard, and you have a few more supporters in here than any usual deck, as you can't really keep afloat as well as many other decks, without drawing new resources every single turn. I'm unsure about putting Skylar in here at the moment since you would like to focus on drawing more cards every turn, rather than searching out single tech cards, but grabbing those tool scrappers when you desperately need them can really make or break a game sometimes. Full Heavy Ball is absolutely necessary for obvious reasons, as it's the best search out there as it has no drawbacks for a deck like this one. Full Switch is also a necessity as versatility is going to be one of your weak points when energy is getting a little bit thin on the ground. I wouldn't advise going any lower than this as you do need to have as many options as available in the game. Experience Share is a card that I'm not that much of a fan of at the moment as Tool Scrapper is still being played so much, but it is just too good to not be played in a deck with so little energy acceleration. When they do get Tool Scrappered, it is a little bit annoying, but when they don't, it gives you such a better board position than you would have otherwise when suffering KOs. Up next is Plus Power, a card that may start making a slight comeback but is a little less powerful than before since Junk Arm is gone and you can't freely get them back as and when you need them, and this is the main reason for running 3 of them. For those times when you can't grab your tool scrappers, Plus Power is the next best thing and gets you more one-hit KOs on Darkrais and just ups your general damage output in other situations. 2 Eviolite are currently in the list, and that's because of EXP share taking up some space. I would maybe suggest switching the numbers up on these depending on your playstyle, as this deck could be played with max Eviolite to keep your attackers alive for longer, or max experience share to give you that extra versatility. For now, I've added a small mix of the two to keep you versatile, but feel free to change it up depending on your playstyle. 2 Tool Scrapper follow on from this and adds to the power of Plus Power, and also helps in those situations when you're faced with a non-fighting weak EX to take out. Getting rid of their Eviolites makes sure you can still take those one-hit KOs with Terrakion EX's Pump Up Smash. Overall, this list is very tight as you need so much draw support for it to keep running smoothly, but it is a very interesting and pretty good deck. Darkrai is still a very good card even with the abundance of fighting types out there at the moment, and if you think your cities is going to be filled with them, then make sure you test out this deck for yourself. As for cards that you can fill the space with, definitely try out Energy Switch either on top of the experience share you have or instead of, as you need some energy acceleration support in here somewhere, and you can also try out Skylar as mentioned earlier to help you grab those clutch cards such as Plus Power and Tool Scrapper when you need them the most. In the end, this is a very strong deck choice if you take into consideration how well Electric is doing at the moment, but its strength in being mono-type can really be its downside as it can really get beat down by the likes of Shaman EX, which may start to be played even more because of the potential rise in these particular decks. So at the beginning of the episode, I did say I was going to be talking about 2 deck ideas that Landorus could be included in. So the second one I want to talk about quickly is Landorus Darkrai. So not only is Landorus fairly threatening to Darkrai, but it turns out that worst enemies can actually work really well together, as we saw with Darkrai and Terrakion at Regionals. Let's jump straight into the list as it really isn't going to be that hard to explain as we're familiar with pretty much all the cards included. To be put simply, this deck is taking the popular formula used many times in the past of taking 2 best attackers in the format and then sticking them into the same deck, and 9 times out of 10 this actually works. This appears to be no exception when it comes to Darkrai and Landorus. To start the list, we have 3 of each attacker as well as 3 Sableye, and as we all know, the advantage of being able to use Sableye is incredible and gives you a huge advantage over the rest of the format, especially with computer search now available to abuse as well. You aren't going to need as many Sableye as usual since you now have an early attacker which you would prefer to attack with, so maybe even dropping down to 2 wouldn't be a bad thing to consider. The rest of the list is actually incredibly standard and set on just being as consistent as possible and getting damage onto the field on turn 1, and then getting Darkrai's powered up on the bench to finish what Landorus leaves behind. Maximum energy switch paired with dark patches should be all you need to get both attackers going as quickly as possible, and having max energy switch at your disposal means you can make use of Land's judgment to really bring to the hurt to your opponent in the late game. To fill the couple of spaces you have here, you could go for things such as energy search to make sure that you can pick out the correct energy from the deck when you need it, and switch is also an option too, as I'm sure there still will be some eels around there to give you some paralysing trouble in the early game. Overall, I wish there was more to say about this deck, but it is really that simple. It focuses on getting initial damage on the board with Hammerhead, as well as capitalising on the snipe damage that both of your attackers can provide, one with a very low energy cost. This deck seems to be your traditional Haymaker style deck, and if that's how you like it with huge HP beat sticks, then definitely try this deck out. I'm sure a lot of people are already, so definitely watch out for this duo at Cities. And that is pretty much it for this week's PokeClass. Overall, Landorus EX is a very versatile card and can be put into more than the 2 decks mentioned today, and I'm sure this won't be the last we see of this card in a PokeClass episode. However, for now, definitely try out Landorus in both of these forms in your city's preparation and discover how well this card is going to fit into the metagame. The card is very strong and I'm looking forward to Cities to find out just how well it can perform. So thank you all for watching this week's episode of PokeClass, and if you did enjoy this video, please click that like button, add the video to your favourites, and make sure you subscribe too if you're new to the channel. Also, please leave your comment below with how you're going to build Landorus, and I'd love to hear if you think it has what it takes to take Cities by storm. Thanks again for watching guys, and I hope you have a great week.